I am so pleased to welcome back my next guest. It's not every day that I get to welcome back an old friend who I know Crowdsource The Truth viewers have missed, Larry Klayman, the living legend in the flesh. Larry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jason. You're too kind. You're great in your own right.
Well, it's very good to see you, Larry. They say reconciliation is good for the soul, and you and I haven't done a show in almost 3 years. I want to make sure that Crowdsource The Truth viewers are still visiting freedomwatchusa.org. Larry has been busy bringing a lot of cases. I know that people have heard about it. But Larry, things have gotten really bad since the last time you and I spoke, and I think it's an important moment for us to come together. You've got a lot to share with us about this Judge Boasberg. What can we say about this guy?
Hey, Boasberg. Well, Jason, I've written several books about federal judges in particular, and state judges, some of them. And it was Thomas Jefferson with regard to federal judges. He was against Article III judges. He said they would become despots and tyrants, causing us to shed the blood of patriots and tyrants yet again every 20 years or so. What's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? It's the natural manure of government. He didn't want to see anybody harmed or dead, and neither do I. But I wrote this book, It Takes a Counter-Revolution, and it takes a revolution, and I go through a number of federal judges who are compromised and corrupt, most of them on the court in the District of Columbia, which of course is more than a swamp, it's a cesspool. And it's not just leftist judges, it's rhino judges there as well. But this Judge Boasberg, I've been in front of before, several times. And he is the one who denied access to both my former group, Judicial Watch, which I founded, as you know, in 1994, and my current group, freedomwatchusa.org. And people can go there to contribute with tax-deductible contributions because we really need the help right now. And I'm going to explain why. But he would not release the photograph of bin Laden's body. So here it is. The guy protected a terrorist at that time. He's a radical leftist, as President Trump said. He's a radical environmentalist. You have information that you uncovered today, and so did our friend and colleague Laura Loomer. But this is also a guy who let Kevin Kleinsmith, an FBI lawyer, off the hook with no jail time when he falsified an FBI affidavit which triggered, in large part, the Russian collusion witch hunt against President Trump. He hates Trump. He hates anybody associated with Trump. And frankly, most of these leftist judges on the D.C. federal court also hate Trump, and even some of the rhino judges do, the Republican and name-only judges. And today, after President Trump called Boasberg a radical leftist, and here's what he did just last Friday. President Trump has Tom Homan and company in the immigration, and Kristi Noem, of Department of Homeland Security, arrest and incarcerate Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang that has raped and killed young women and others. He sends them on a plane to Venezuela. The leftist group, I think it was the ACLU, files a lawsuit. Boasberg enjoins President Trump from doing that while the plane is already in the air and orders it to go back to the United States. Now, fortunately, President Trump ignored his order, came up with, an argument that, well, the plane was already in international waters. But the fact is that this judge has no authority over President Trump's ordering these people to be deported, zero. And then President Trump says, well, he's a radical leftist. And then, if you can believe this, and I can, and you can, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Roberts, who just ruled against John Roberts, Trump last week, along with Coney Barrett, saying that he couldn't temporarily pause foreign aid for stuff like condoms to Hamas, transgender studies on mice in foreign countries, whether men menstruate in foreign countries. He trashes Trump, saying you can't impeach a judge like this and you shouldn't use that language. Why can't you use that language? Because these judges are compromised and corrupt. And Boasberg should not only be impeached, he should be prosecuted for violating his oath of office. It's time that some of these judges spend some time, just like they did with the J6 peaceful protesters, in prison. Give them 90 days and let them think about it, because they are destroying this country. President Trump has issued hundreds of executive orders. There are now 84 and counting cases that have been filed to block his executive orders. They know where to file it, the left. They file it in places like Boston, Massachusetts. They file it in Seattle, Washington. They file it in Washington, D.C., and other leftist places.
New
And
York.
how these cases are even assigned, Jason. We don't know. It's supposed to be the Wheel of Fortune, but I doubt that as well. They wind up in front of radical leftist judges. One of them in Rhode Island paid over $100,000 to get his job, which Sheldon
Unbelievable. Larry,
Whitehouse.
let me add something quickly because, you and I have a lot of history that people might not recall. And, years ago, you had said to me when I was struggling with my own problems about the process of case assignment that it was random. And I don't blame you for saying that because I've seen a lot of places where it says that. But when I started to detect from my own cases that it didn't seem random, it seemed to defy statistical odds the way things were working out. I searched the local rules of the Southern District of New York and I found the language about how cases are assigned. Nowhere does the word random appear. It says they are appropriately assigned, and that is certainly open to interpretation.
Yeah, they're frequently assigned well, if there's any sense of legitimacy, which there rarely is, to a judge that just takes the bench. He needs a new caseload, so they're lightening the caseload for the other judges. And in the Southern District of New York, I brought a case against Sacha Baron Cohen for defamation. And we actually had an Obama judge that was favorably disposed. I brought it for Judge Roy Moore in Alabama when he was defamed, on This Is America, the show that Sacha Baron Cohen was doing. And it mysteriously gets reassigned to a new Rhino Republican judge who dismissed the case. I think he didn't like uh, Judge Moore because Judge Moore's been very strong, in opposing homosexuality. And this judge, I think, was homosexual. I'm not going to use his name. But, this is how it happens. And they wear their personal biases on their sleeve. They have their agendas. The chief judges in a court, yeah, they can step in and reassign or assign the cases.
Oh, wait a
You
minute.
really don't know how it happens.
They just told me no, Larry. I sent a letter to the chief judge in the Southern District of New York, and she said, we'll read the letter another time. But see, what you're saying is not incorrect, Larry. This is what all lawyers are told, and we, the public, are to believe, but it's not the way it actually works. See, the first Trump presidency, in my view, it seemed to expose the vast corruption within corporate media and the news, something that a lot of people, my generation and my parents' generation, they believed everything on the news. And I think now far few people feel that way. And I believe Trump 2.0, that's happening with the judiciary.
Well, it played a very large part, I believe, in Trump's election on November 5th of last year. People saw how
The
corrupt
corruption,
the
you mean?
system is. Yeah, and they saw
Yeah.
how they were trying to destroy him, and they were able to project people who have cases in family court, particularly men, are not treated equally frequently in family court. Women can come in, and I'm not anti-woman, and I'm not saying this happens. Sometimes men lie too, but they can make all these allegations and walk off, and nothing happens. And everybody's had a bad experience with a judge. I remember years ago when I was running Judicial Watch, and of course the name, and I founded it, is what it says, watching judges. And then we use them to watch the other two branches and bring cases. I remember I did a talk show in New York City, and I mentioned, what I've been talking about with these judges, the partisanship, the corruption, how they favor the vested interest, the powerful, the ones that put them on the bench, and people literally in the audience. And this was basically, a mixed audience, race-wise and political-wise and religion-wise. They got up and cheered. They screamed because nearly everybody has had a bad experience with a judge in court. Lawyers are bad enough. There's the old expression, if lawyers moving their mouth, they're lying, right? Well, who are
Yeah.
the judges? They're lawyers. They're even worse than the
Right.
lawyers because they're there to protect everyone. They're not to be partisan. Lawyers are advocates, but judges are there to be impartial, and they need to be held accountable. Now, Roberts, this is true, Jason, too, and we have some new information about Boasberg that you uncovered and Laura Luma uncovered. But Roberts, years ago, issued an annual report where the issue was whether or not certain judges had conflicts of interest. And he said the Supreme Court does not have to adhere to the Code of Judicial Conduct, and it's probably unconstitutional. This same Supreme Court has given immunity. It doesn't exist in the Constitution, doesn't exist in legislation to lower federal court judges. So they feel that they can do whatever they want. And then if you file an ethics complaint against them, and I filed many over the years, it goes to their fellow colleagues in the same courthouse that
Yeah.
throw it in the trash. They
Yep.
throw it in the trash. There's no accountability. So here's the breaking news, and we'll talk about this later because we're going to be doing a show every Tuesday, is that we're forming a Department of Legal Accountability. It's going to be called DOLA, okay, which will complement what Musk did. And we're going to get prominent conservatives and people of faith and those who just simply believe in the vision of our founding fathers to be part of that. I'm recruiting people right now, and we want to work with Pam Bondi, who I believe is a good person. She's going to have her hands full over there because 95% of that department are Democrat leftists, and Trump needs help because he's been enjoined in most of the executive orders, and we also need to carry out our citizens' grand juries. We're not going to be physical. We're not going to arrest anybody, but we need to educate the American people that these judges should be prosecuted, they should be tried, and they should be sentenced because they're violating their oath of office and betraying the American people.
Larry, can Congress pass something like a Judicial Modernization Act and say, hey, judges are appointed for a term of 10 years, or they don't have the power to change it like that?
Well, I made a five-part proposal years ago while I was at Judicial Watch, and I used it when I ran for the Senate in Florida, is that judges, contrary to popular belief, are not appointed for life. They serve for good behavior. And so I was proposing they have term limits, initial 4-year or 5-year term, renewable for good behavior. And that can be codified in legislation. So this is something that can certainly be taken care of. And there are other things as well. How do you choose judges? You know how we choose judges today in federal court?
They just let the president pick.
Well, campaign contributions.
Right.
This clown up there in Rhode Island, who's Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator you see on TV trashing, conservatives and others that are up for confirmation, a mafia-infested state, launders money to get these people on the bench. And he's not unique. Nearly all the senators do. There was one judge up there that got on the bench with a $500,000 contribution. Another one recently who joined Trump, several $100,000 up there in Rhode Island. And it's not just Rhode Island, it's everywhere. How do you get a judgeship? You buy it. And these big law firms, Wilmer Hale, for instance, has a judge on the DC courts, both Republican and Democrat. They can go to clients and say, hey, we got these judges in our pocket. We put them up there, So this is what's happening. By the way, I'm quite happy that Trump is taking action against some of these big law firms. They
Exactly.
need to be sanctioned. These people, I'm not making any specific allegations except for Perkins Coie, and I've been up against Elias and Covington and Burling, and they're all Democrat leftist hacks. That's what they are. And I'm glad he took away their security clearances. He told them they can't do federal business. They can't even walk into a federal building. It's about time.
But wait a minute, didn't Beryl Howell somehow reverse this? She enjoined some of it.
Temporarily, she did, temporarily. Well, Beryl Howell, who on the surface is a nice person, but she's an ultra-leftist. She got on the bench through Senator Pat Leahy, who's an ultra-leftist from Vermont.
Yeah, well, see, Larry, we got to start looking into this because Beryl Howell, perhaps she's been polite. I've never interacted with her personally, but she is from the most disgusting hell. What does he say in Star Wars? The most wretched hive of villainy and scum in the known galaxy, the Eastern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office. Beryl Howell was in there with Valerie Caproni and Andrew Weissman in the Organized Crime Division. There is a seed within that U.S. Attorney's Office in the late 80s, early 90s. That's where Jack Smith came out of. This is a cesspit, Larry, and the people who are now in the judiciary that came out of there are all criminals.
I have a funny story, and then I want to move on to what you've uncovered. But years ago, when I was going through a difficult time in my life, because I've been fighting these wars, I had a conference call with her on a case. and I accidentally called her sweetie because I was like, my mind was somewhere else, and she kind of liked it. And and then, and then she asked me during that conference call, she said, "Mr. Klayman, I've never done this before. Can you give me advice?" And I was kind
Wow.
of shocked. Years later, when I brought a case for Sheriff Arpaio, with regard to an amnesty that Obama had granted to 5 million illegal aliens, I was in front of her, and she flattered me. She said, "Mr. Klayman, you're far more famous than I am, but I'm sorry, I've got to deny your request here." And she dismissed it on political reasons. There was no basis. Later, the Fifth
Wow.
Circuit and Supreme Court affirmed that this was a valid case. I joined 25 attorneys general. She's very political. Pat Leahy is a raving leftist. And she refused to do anything about the leaks that were coming out of Robert Mueller's office as special counsel. I petitioned her to stop the leaks. She would take no action. And she allowed Mueller to virtually destroy, President Trump.
Well, and
So
that's what I mean, because she was in on the plan. Andrew Weissman, I'm sure you recall, was the lead investigator, and he's written a book since that case has ended called Where Law Ends, which he takes obviously from the famous phrase, where law ends, tyranny begins. I don't know exactly where Weissman sees himself fitting in right there, but in the book, he says that, he told, what's his name? Robert Mueller. He told Robert Mueller to bring in Felix Sater, who was an FBI confidential human informant who had been embedded in the Trump organization as early as 1999. He was a Clinton guy there to spy on Trump. So all of this Burl Howell, Andrew Weissman, Valerie Caproni, Jack Smith, Eastern District of New York stuff, this is a tight cabal. I'm not trying to diminish
it's not just that. It's everywhere, Jason. It's everywhere. And the federal courts, by and large, are compromised and corrupt. I'm in Florida a lot. I'm a Florida lawyer. I'm a Florida citizen. And the fact is that these state court judges, I mean, there's some that are not so good and there's some that are bad, but most of them actually are respectful to the lawyers. They have to be elected, so they have to be responsive to a great degree. They can be voted out of office. But with these federal judges who feel that they're there for life, they do as they please. And they're more powerful in some respects than the President of the United States. And
It's
that's the
scary.
scary part about it. It's
It
scary.
is.
And they issue these nationwide injunctions, and now this Judge Boasberg, and tell us what you found and what Laura's found, because this guy is corrupt to the core. He's a
Yeah.
hack. If you look at his background, he's ultra leftist. Trump is absolutely right. And he let this guy, Kevin Kleinsmith, off the hook. And so did the DC bar, because they both were anti-Trump. So, okay, let him off the hook. The guy pled guilty to a felony and he walks. And the GC bar lets him walk with a slap on the wrist. In any other bar, he'd be disbarred on the spot. Yet they go after people like
Not
me,
New
or they
York.
go after Giuliani, or they go after John Eastman, professor, or Jeffrey
Yeah.
Clark, or Senators Josh Hawley and Senators Ted Cruz and Kellyanne Conway. There's a long list of conservatives that have been fighting the bar for years. I've been fighting them for 14 years. I have 12 lawsuits against them. I don't roll over.
Jeez.
But the fact is that it's a combination of things. It's these judges, it's the bar associations, it's the prosecutors, the politicized prosecutors that are a bunch of hacks. And we need to take the legal system apart and put it back together again. And that's why I'm forming this Department of Legal Accountability. And I trust that President Trump will take note, because we want to work with him on that, just like Elon Musk is working with him, on the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah. We also should let people know, Larry, that you've started a Substack page. People can get on there by going to larryklayman.substack.com. And starting next week, people will be able to see simulcasts of your videos here on Crowdsource the Truth. We're going to be doing them every week. And, you just mentioned Senator Leahy, who famously was one of the guys to receive anthrax in the mail after 9/11. He became really good friends with William Barr and Joe Biden as a result, I guess. So I don't know what is up with Leahy.
He's a dinosaur at this point, but even before he became a dinosaur, he used to come up to me and I think he thought I was somebody else, and I was pretty well known, running Judicial Watch. His mind looked like it was gone, frankly. But in any event, tell us what you uncovered with Laura Loomer on Boasberg.
Well, it was independent of Laura, but obviously everybody knows Laura's doing incredible research all the time. She's like a machine. And she put out a tweet last night saying that she has discovered something about the judge. I presumed it was going to be about the daughter, and so I just started looking around for the name Boasberg. Couldn't find anything about the daughter, so I figured I would wait for whatever Laura was going to release. But I found this person, Margaret Boasberg, who it turns out is the judge's sister. And I mean, you can see the familial resemblance right there. She's a twin. There are two sisters, and she's married to this guy whose name is Chris Beerley. And the thing that's interesting about Chris Beerley, there he is right there. Let's listen to what he has to say. He is with Bain Capital, Larry. You remember who started Bain Capital, right? Mitt Romney?
Yeah.
Listen to this.
And so I started thinking about maybe I should leave strategy consulting and go work for, work in the music industry. One of my good friends did that, went to work for Sony, and then went to become the number 2 guy at Bad Boy Entertainment, which is, Sean Combs or Puff Daddy's private business, and did that for 20 years. But I almost followed him into the music business.
So he talks about how this friend of his works with P. Diddy. This guy started a foundation with his wife called the Beerley Boasberg Foundation. And there's a lot of money coming into that thing. It's a tax-exempt organization. And, Larry, one of the things that I've been able to do, I've learned so much from working with you. I've told everybody, you're like my Mr. Miyagi when it comes to the law, because you used to tell me to do things and I had no idea what you were telling me to do and no idea how to do them. And it made no sense to me. But years later, you were in my head and I was like, I know what he means now. But between working with you and Charles and Bob Bishop, I've learned so many things. Charles and Bob have shown me how to read these 990s from the IRS, and these guys have engaged in a trick where they basically have donated stock. This thing has been tax exempt. The Beerley Boasberg Foundation has been tax exempt since 2000, and the thing about it is they did this scheme, Larry, where they are using, I think it's non-appreciated stock. We need to get Charles involved for the detailed aspects of this, but basically they started this thing by donating stock, which they probably paid, nothing for. And if we go to their 990 here from 2001, so this is again the judge's sister and brother-in-law started this foundation, and when we go down here to see the contributions, you'll see it says non-stock somewhere here. These are all old addresses from a public filing, non-cash, I mean. But anyway, the point is this is one of these nonprofits that millions of dollars can come into. We don't know who's putting the money in. You can see right here, it's talking about they're giving $20,000 in non-cash. So these are shares of Thermware Inc., DDI, Home Depot. So they've got $100,000 worth of Home Depot shares going into this charity. Forgive me for not being fully educated in the financial details to articulate why this is a problem, but I can assure you I shared this with Charles and all the red lights went off. He's digging into this to figure out more. The issue is, Larry, it seems more than a pattern. It's almost de rigueur.
Yeah, you know what? To live in Washington, D.C. in particular is extremely expensive. And it's like Los Angeles or it's like New York City. And these judges make around a couple $100,000. So it wouldn't surprise me that they have these methods of laundering money, a la Joe Biden and the rest of them. It's just the way they do things. And
Yeah.
And why is it in 240 some years, okay, since we became a republic, that only 8 judges have been impeached? Are you telling me that judges don't take bribes? I mean, this is human nature. In fact, it was Jefferson who said, unelected, unaccountable to the people, no more honest than any other man. They didn't refer to women in those days, obviously. And that's the case. But why is it that the FBI lays off them and doesn't, investigate? The last judge to be impeached was Alice E. Hastings in Miami, and then he ran for Congress, claimed he was impeached because he was black, and became a congressman and lived happily ever after until he died in the last few years.
But didn't he shoot somebody or something really egregious, like beat up his wife or something?
I don't know about that, but we don't have the best and the brightest. We have politicians in robes at best. We have corrupt shysters at worst. And there are some good federal judges, but they're few and far between because they are put on the bench through political campaign contributions and other forms of grease. In the Republican side, Trump didn't know who he appointed. In my book, It Takes a Counter-Revolution, Wake Up America, which you can get at freedomwatchusa.org with a contribution over a certain amount, or Amazon or whatever, is that I point out how these judges came to the bench and what they do once they get to the bench. And it is extremely frightening that these are the way we choose judges. We don't have the best and the brightest. We have the absolute worst, honestly.
Now, there's a little bit more that I want to share with you, Larry, because the guy that Chris Beerley was talking about in that University of Virginia video, he said a friend of his went to work for P. Diddy. And so somebody found this guy, Ben Meselius, who seems to be the guy that he's talking about. This guy, Ben Meselius, he is the co-founder of the Midas Touch Network. Have you heard of that, Larry?
I've heard of it. I don't know much about it. That's something.
This is a very anti-Trump podcasting network that pays influencers and does podcasts with idiots like Norm Eisen and Benjamin Wittes. And I mean, this is just basically a propaganda network. So it's pretty interesting that this guy is great friends with the brother-in-law of the judge. It's like we've got this RICO operating.
Look at what we saw in New York City with the judges that prosecuted Trump, where, the daughter was working for the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
I forget his name right now, but Merchan, yeah. And Trump faces that when he's finished with his term. Merchan is probably going to sentence him to jail time.
I think Merchan is not going to make it. He's going to get disbarred or something is going to happen. I mean, listen, Larry, you said it long ago. There's another thing that you said to me that's stuck in my brain, that you basically warned everybody. You said, this is the most dangerous thing that they're doing, because when they mess with the judiciary, and if a certain number of people begin to realize that there is no civilized way to settle grievances, people will be left with no choice. And we are not encouraging violence or calling anyone to violence. We're warning against it. But you told me that, Larry, and it's stuck in my brain. You're right.
And that's throughout my book. It Takes a Counter-Revolution, Wake Up America. And the prior one, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. Yes, that and the prior one, Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment, because that's what caused me to start Judicial Watch. And I saw it, in a micro. It's gotten much worse since I started Judicial Watch in 1994.
Yeah.
Of course, now I run Freedom Watch. By the way, this hat, America's Sheriff, that's another nonprofit. You can find that at americassheriff.org, 2 S's. I formed that with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, America's Sheriff. So, we need to fight against this because, yes, we are headed into potentially a bloody revolution. And God forbid, and the left is already saying they're going into the streets. They're burning Teslas, they're firebombing dealerships, they're threatening to kill people. I don't believe that the 2 assassination attempts on President Trump will be the last. God forbid. I pray for him. Hopefully God, is watching over him as he did in Butler, Pennsylvania. But they want us dead. They want us dead, Jason. And you can see that.
Larry. That's the swatting that they've been doing. I mean, this has been happening to me for the past 8 years, and it's been happening to you for more, maybe 20 years before I even met you. So I know you're pressed for time tonight, Larry, but I am really glad to have reconnected with you and to be bringing you back into the fold here on Crowdsource the Truth. I want to make sure people know they're going to be able to watch us every week moving forward. We've got a lot of stuff to discuss, got a lot of questions, Larry. I wonder if you and I might not be able to work on some kind of a draft or an outline or ideas for a Judicial Modernization Act that we could offer to various members of Congress. One problem that I see is that these people in Congress aren't necessarily lawyers, don't necessarily have a legal background or even know where to start with these things.
Look at an example, and we're going to have a show every Tuesday, and so people should tune in. And I hope people, and I know I'm being very solicitous here, will go to freedomwatchusa.org, freedomwatchusa.org, and contribute with tax-deductible contributions, because we really need the help. We were hurt for a number of reasons recently by particularly even Rhino fundraising during the election. But yes, we need to work on this. But as just one example of why we need to take the lead is Jim Jordan, head of the House Judiciary Committee. Goes on Fox News, no jacket, tie, former wrestling coach from Ohio State. In 8 years, he hasn't called one judge up to the Senate, to the House Judiciary Committee, and they are charged with oversight and to begin impeachment proceedings. He's done nothing. All he does is go on Fox News to raise money and self-aggrandizement. These people need to be pushed and backed up against a wall peacefully and legally. And if they don't do their job, themselves prosecuted, frankly, because that is also a violation of their oath of office. The guy has not called one judge to appear. Why isn't he calling them up and say, how do you come up with this decision, Boasberg? How do you come up with that? Please explain that to us.
Right. They could have a hearing and just ask the guy. It doesn't need to be an impeachment, but I would like to see impeachments happening. Listen, Larry, I'm sensitive to your tight time schedule tonight, but we'll be back next week, and this problem is not going away, so we're going to have a lot to discuss. People should definitely check out Larry's new Substack. You can get to that by going to larryklayman.substack.com, and we're working to establish the video feed on there. In the meantime, people can go to freedomwatchusa.org and go to the donate button right there. Tap on that, and you can make a donation to Freedom Watch, help Larry carry on the fight. We'll be back next week. And don't forget, you can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com, and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Welcome back, Larry, and thank you for joining me tonight. Thanks, everybody, for watching. See you soon.
Thank you, Jason.